These days, it can be hard to trust the media. What's true, what's fake, and who is behind the message? I'm a freelance journalist and videographer who has spent years studying the media. Now I'm taking a look at what local, regional, and national news stories mean to us here in North Central Washington. I'm Dominick Bonny, and this is Common Sense. Hello and welcome to Common Sense. I'm Dominick Bonny, and in the last episode, we heard from all three candidates running for Wenatchee School Board Position 5. I also responded to a critic and asked why a few local pastors keep getting involved in local politics. I'll follow up more on that story in the coming weeks. Now, though, I want to jump right back into my second part of these interviews with Arlette Lopez-Rodriguez, Miranda Skalitsky, and Julie Norton. If you are a Wenatchee voter, you will have already received your ballot in the mail, and the deadline to vote in the primary election is August 3rd. Only 2 of these 3 candidates will make it past the primary. So if you are undecided, this is just the episode for you. If you're just tuning in for part 2, these conversations will still make sense. But if you want to get the entire conversation and make your decision as a voter in context, go to NCWLIFE.com and find the full episodes tab. That was Common Sense episode 37, and this is episode 38. Last episode, we got our fiber in and talked about issues of substance, like what the candidates think are the biggest challenges facing the district, what their goals are, and so forth. In this episode, we're going to take a foray into celluloid land and talk about critical race theory and other hot-button issues folks in the national media are using to gin up emotions and animate voters to turn out en masse and rage vote in school board elections across the country. Now, my goal isn't to give nothing burgers more attention than they deserve, but rather to let reasonable people know that the con is on and to be wary of anyone who is long on emotional arguments but short on facts when it comes to issues that affect our children and their educations. Now let's jump right back into my interviews with Ms. Lopez-Rodriguez, Ms. Skalitsky, and Ms. Norton. Topics like critical race theory and the gender unicorn thing, which some people are making a lot of hay out of. Do you believe that those are issues that should be front and center for our school board candidates to be running on?
I think being an elected official and being a school board member goes beyond just personal agendas. I think while many people may have concerns, I think, if you're running, you need to prioritize the entirety of the school district and look beyond, some narrow topics, which may be valid, but I think if we can see past, individual issues and individual beliefs, I think what's really going to unite us is the education of our children. And if, politics is getting in the way of that, then it's an issue. And we need to recenter back on the students because some of these issues have more, I don't know.
Yeah, they're more of a national.
Right.
More of a national push behind this stuff.
Right, and I think we need to focus on the needs of Wenatchee before we focus on things that maybe even aren't being taught at our schools.
Well, exactly. Critical race theory isn't even a part of our curriculum, so.
Right. As a student, I can personally say critical race theory is not on the course schedule. Yeah. So even if it was, I don't think teachers are equipped to teach that. It's a college level law school curriculum that is nowhere near our public education system.
Yeah. And some of the things that it seems like less informed individuals are saying are things along the lines of they're going to teach our kids to hate white people. You just graduated. Did they teach you to hate white people?
Personally, no. I was never taught to hate a white person, and I do not hate anyone based on their identity. And I think what we need to teach is to love each other and to accept each other regardless of where we come from, of what our socioeconomic status is. And if we're able to teach that, then critical race theory ceases to exist.
Yeah. Judge people on the content of their character, not on the color of their skin.
Right, like Martin Luther King said.
exactly. Yeah, so this is one that I wish that we didn't have to talk about, and in fact I've heard it recently from a local administrator in schools high up, and I love the term of calling it conspiracy race theory, not critical race theory, because that's what it's really predicated upon, is conspiracy theories and misinformation. But do you believe that topics like critical race theory and this gender unicorn thing have a place in the dialogue that's happening in this race, around these races, or are serious topics for candidates running for your position to put, front and center as a part of their strategy to win?
CRT, critical race theory, is not taught K through 12. It is not in the Wenatchee School District's curriculum. It's not even in the Washington State's agenda or curriculum to teach students critical race theory. And the gender unicorn, it was already addressed with Dr. Gordon in an email chain addressing the issue after some parents and community members spoke of concern about it. It was promoting inclusion and promote a positive environment and inclusion that is stated in the school district's mission statement. And I think Dr. Gordon did a good job identifying that it wasn't an issue at the time. So
yeah, they're also making it seem like these gender unicorn posters are just papering the walls of every single hallway. And really, from what I understand, is this is in a school resource room at Mission View Elementary. One school, one room, where maybe if you were a kid who has some questions, who needs to talk to an educator about those issues, then that's where they go, right? It's not in every classroom.
No, and again, it did not. The poster was not advocating or encouraging bias or prejudice behavior. It was in one room, and it was based on the teacher's belief that it was promoting a diverse, inclusive environment to make students feel welcome. And that's what the schools should be doing in their prospective classroom, is providing a positive learning environment and making your students feel welcome and feel like it's a safe haven and a second place for them to essentially what you want to call home, or just to feel like a place of belonging, not to be segregated or to be separated or excluded from a particular group of individuals.
Yeah. Well, and that was kind of my next two questions, are about stuff like, do you believe that topics like critical race theory have a place in this race, or are serious topics for serious candidates running for school board to put front and center in their campaigning?
I personally haven't done it because I think it draws too much in the minutia of the curriculum, which is not really what the school board does. But it is important. But we don't know, with the new state laws, we don't really know what the plan is to be implemented. We know it's going to have a more central focus, and where the board will get involved is how is it implemented. I am not in support of the historic, the origins of the theory and separating based on race, which is a concern. There's threads that have value, such as we do need to be mindful of experiences of other cultures, and we need to know and appreciate that and acknowledge that. But there's discrepancies in the teaching itself. So it's not something you should necessarily run a campaign on. I'll be candid if somebody asks me about it. But we don't know what the plan is right now or how it's being used, so it's hard to say I will or won't allow this to happen. We've got a state law that kind of says you have to incorporate something, so in some ways your hands are a little bit tied, but it's not been the center of what I do. I am concerned, and it's something on the board that it needs to be measured and carefully thought through, and
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think maybe there's some misconception over how much power the school board really has, because like you said, your hands are kind of tied. OSPI sets that curriculum, and state legislature. I mean, if you really have a problem with some form of CRT being in our, being in our state schools, the place you should be trying to run and win a seat in is Libya.
Right, and that's kind of what I've talked to people about when they ask me some of these questions. It's I can tell you I'm for or against, but and I can tell you I will or won't push back when opportunities present. But the biggest issue we have is a lot of what we have to implement is from the state, from from OSPI. So there's few opportunities. Like, for example, when we talk about the CRT components, there are different types of diversity equity training, and to the extent we have control, it's maybe picking what type of training you're receiving. There's training that is much more open to acknowledging what's the word? It's sort of understanding cultural differences. And then there's the type of training that is completely more about the you've been oppressed, these are your oppressors, make wrong,
Sure.
and so there is a difference. And so to the extent the school board has any control, yes, I'm going to lean towards to the extent we have to have anything, I'm going to lean towards the let's understand our differences and not to the the you've been oppressed, here's your oppressors, and that type of training.
Yeah. It's a sticky wicket for sure. Like my show is titled Common Sense. I think actually I was talking to administrator in local school district recently, and he said, what we're doing is we're teaching the who, what, where, and the why, and who are the players, when did it happen, where did it happen, what were the consequences, and the implications of that. And sometimes I just worry if we take, for instance, something like, take an example from our region, the Nez Perce and Chief Joseph and the Hell's Canyon trip, basically, where they're trying to get to Canada. If we only teach the who, what, when, and where, and leave out the why, how do you even teach that subject? Because why were they running? Who were they running from? It was the U.S. Cavalry. So if we sanitize stuff too much, then we lose all context of history. So that's something that concerns me,
And I have no issue with a historic understanding of what happened, why it happened. I think we learn best from our history. What concerns me is if it's introduced in a, where I've seen some dramatic examples on the west side is they're implementing by cutting classes because ratios aren't right of particular colors and things like that. So that's where I'm concerned. Or they're actively searching in things that aren't just related to a historical text. I have no issue of learning history. It's how we got here. I have concerns setting our goals based on, exacerbating separations and creating racism and saying, because this happened back then, you're bad now.
Sure.
And so that's where I think some of these trainings run afoul, and that's where what I think a lot of folks are very concerned about. I haven't seen how we're proposing to implement the new laws. What level of training are we needed? I was concerned when an equity coordinator position was put forward, not because I don't think we need to take a look at our schools and really understand what our perceived concerns about access. How can we, I've advocated for a long time that partnerships are really important on any level. One good thing that came out of COVID was parents and teachers met at the beginning of the school year and individually met with each student, and it helped identify, it helped open the communication so that if a parent was going to have an issue, they knew how to address the teacher. The teachers got to meet the student kind of before class started and could sort of understand what maybe challenges they would come from, and we can allocate resources based on understanding a little bit more about each student and creating an environment where they individually feel safe and welcome.
Yeah.
And that to me is a great way to implement sort of an equitable program without having to dumb down standards or say, oh, the ratios are wrong in this class, we can't have it. We were looking at, to kind of get back, we were looking at this equity director, which we've taken off the table now because of budget issues, but I was concerned that we were designing a position when we didn't even understand what the issues were. And it was drafted very much in the part of CRT that concerns me, where it was saying, looking, and I don't remember the exact words, but it was sort of like finding racist practices. And it was like, well, that suggests the district is actually intentionally doing something racist. And I didn't think that should be in a job description. Yeah. Because we're not. I'm not aware of any intentionally racist action at the district. So it's things like that where there's concern about how it's being implemented or what the perception is of these programs being implemented.
Sure. I mean, you could have unintentional racism, though.
Right.
And there's plenty of that.
Sure.
It's born of ignorance. It's born of maybe never even interacting with somebody of a different race or a different type of race.
Right.
And you have this kind of almost childlike, naive racism that isn't necessarily born of malice per se. It's born of ignorance.
Yeah, and I have a hard time considering that. To me, racism is actually more active. Maybe that's more like stereotypes or just not understanding. It's tough, but I agree. Racism exists. It's real. I don't dispute that. I don't think anyone is intentionally fostering or facilitating it, especially at the district. But we need to be aware of perceived biases and impacts that may feel that way.
We'll be back after the break with more.
Your search for quality patio furniture with excellent customer service is over. Blue Lagoon is proud to offer only the finest outdoor furniture and accessories from some of the most renowned manufacturers in the industry. Our showroom showcases a large selection of in-stock furniture, fire pits, umbrellas, cushions, and outdoor accessories. Our in-house outdoor decor specialist is available to help you design and custom order the perfect furniture for your unique space.
Are you a take charge kind of person? Consider a career as a health unit coordinator. You'll work to keep health facilities running efficiently by coordinating medical providers, patients, and departments. The Charter College Certificate in Health Unit Coordinator program can get you up to speed on basic patient care, health records management, health and safety procedures, and medical billing. And the 10-month online program includes a computer you keep. Get started at chartercollege.edu, where we work to get you to work.
Hi, I'm Chuck Dronan, Managing Member at Eplidolin Retirement and Assisted Living. It's been a tough year for all of us, but especially for those working and living in senior care facilities. Over the course of these many difficult months, our staff at Eplidolin has been vigilant in adhering to federal and state guidelines to protect and assure the safety of our residents and their caregivers. If you're in need of assisted living for a loved one, give us a call at Eplidolin. We're here for you.
Hi folks, welcome to Save Mart. How can we help you today?
We're looking for a recliner.
Okay, right this way. Go ahead and move this chase on the other side. You can just lifetime warranty.
Great, I want that one. I would like that one.
That's a great choice.
And I want this one as well.
Okay.
And I definitely want this one.
Ooh. You'll find it at Save Mart. Full service at a low, low price.
Welcome back. Let's jump right back into these interviews with the candidates running for Wenatchee School Board Position 5. Arlette Lopez-Rodriguez, Miranda Skolitsky, and incumbent Julie Norton.
As a young person, you have a lot of options in your future. You could go away to college or do whatever you really wanted. Why run for school board? Why stay in Wenatchee? Why do this?
That's a great question, because prior to even filing, I was planning to attend Washington State University, and I had a secure job to work for a college access program. And once I realized the severity of and the importance of local elections, I realized that my passion truly lies in serving Wenatchee. So if I'm able to continue my education at WVC and online at a university for the next 4 years, then that is a sacrifice I'm willing to make if it means I can better serve the students my peers and the families that have been underserved for far too long. I think time is important, and the time is now to speak up and stand true and unite everyone on the values of the Wenatchee School District.
Yeah. Do you think some of the reason for so much interest in the school board election is due to backlash because of decisions made during COVID?
Some of it, I think, is with COVID, it was scary, it was traumatic, it was stressful, so much uncertainty, continuous unknowns. People wanted answers and wanted a resolution of some sort. How are we going to move forward for the sake of everybody? And I think it's just trying to demand and find answers right now, and rather than thinking of everything as a whole and thinking of putting everybody together as a team. How are we going to best put our foot forward, not just for us as parents, but for the sake for our students and our educators and all of our staff? Because it affected everybody. It didn't affect just a certain group.
Right.
Everybody was impacted with COVID in some way.
Do you think that there's so much interest in this election? I mean, we've got 10 candidates before the primaries. I think there's a lot of people in town who are saying, and I'm hearing this a lot, I've never seen this before.
Right.
You know, do you think that probably the COVID angst or COVID anger is a contributing factor to that?
I do. I think a lot of it, I know I haven't run my campaign based on some of these state law changes and some of the discrete theories and how those are being implemented. I know that's a concern, but I feel like where parents really got frustrated, and that's why you're seeing such interest in some of the races, is there was a very different feeling about how the district handled the response to the emergency, who they were listening to, the transparency in that process. And I think that's what really got folks frustrated and motivated, saying, we don't know what's going on. Why aren't we, when our community is suing the governor to go back to work, why are we not appearing as aggressive to do that? What is the plan? Who's making the plan? And then just not feeling heard, not feeling that needs were met. Some of the candidates had individual issues with the process in terms of students that weren't getting critical needs met. And so it was a lot of failures that I think that really got some of them motivated, coupled with these new more political curriculum type issues that are also real important to parents in this area. So I think it's having a voice in what is going on in our schools that really has them motivated. But I think COVID for sure exacerbated that, and yeah, this is unheard of, unprecedented.
I'd like to thank all three candidates for the position 5 seat on the Wenatchee School Board for taking the time to speak with me. I'd especially like to thank Julie Norton because her home was in the neighborhood that was threatened by the Red Apple fire, and for a few days there it was not certain that firefighters could save all the homes in the Sunny Slope neighborhood. So it was a stressful week for her, and I appreciate her taking the time to meet me for this interview. I think we were all greatly relieved that those homes in Sunny Slope were saved, and I hope that you join me in remembering and supporting our neighbors up north who are still dealing with the Chewia Creek fire and the Cub Creek fires. But when it comes to the issues we covered in this episode, it's clear at this point that there is a national political agenda being pushed on small communities throughout the country to influence school board elections. According to Business Insider, since March, pundits on Fox News have mentioned critical race theory more than 1,300 times. If that's your main source of information, it's likely that you think critical race theory is a bigger deal than it really is. But is there really a coordinated local effort being pushed by political partisans to focus attention on these divisive issues in order to manipulate people right here in our community and spread misinformation? Could folks in this community really either be gullible enough to prioritize these issues over real ones, or worse, could they be attempting to leverage manufactured outrage to manipulate people right here in our community in order to further their political agendas? The answer is yes, and here's proof. This week I came across this letter distributed in a well-to-do Wenatchee neighborhood written by the volunteer GOP precinct Committee Chairman, or PCC. In it, the new PCC starts by saying that the school board will decide if our kids have to wear masks when they go back to school in the fall. Then sex education and critical race theory come up. It's basically the greatest hits tour. Let me quote from the letter here on critical race theory. Quote, if I understand it correctly, critical race theory suggests that one's race and one's racial history are deemed more important than your current character, and that every human relationship must be viewed through the lens of one another's race and racial history, end quote. If you had the time to write the letter, print a bunch of copies of it, organize volunteers to stuff envelopes, or do it yourself, and then pay for postage, wouldn't you also have the time to do some basic research about the topics you want to use to influence others? The con is on, and it's closer to home than we would like to admit. The letter, which came with the cover sheet that features the official Chelan County GOP letterhead and the contact information for the county bigwigs, goes on to tell you how to vote. Here's a close-up shot of the candidates the local GOP political operatives want you to vote for. The party's preferred messaging centers on race, sex, and anger over COVID protocols, and the candidates that kiss the ring and play along get a pat on the head and invitations to speak at GOP gatherings. But back to the letter, because this is the best part. The kicker at the end lands it as predictably and humorously as you can probably imagine. But in case you can't, here's my favorite quote. Quote, the momentum seems to be gaining to take back our community, state, and country, but we will each have to contribute in some way to help our beloved country not become a socialist country, end quote. Now that's bringing out the big guns. If you don't support the party's preferred candidates for this school board election, you might find yourself living in a socialist country. Cue the theatrical beat and dramatic hamster meme. Seriously, cue it. Thank you. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that I think all Republicans are willing and are opportunistically trying to leverage manufactured outrage over issues like critical race theory and sex education in order to win elections so they can get retribution for decisions made by others during a time of historic crisis. I actually know a lot of good people who identify as Republican and conservative, but they don't identify with the current version of the Republican Party. And who can blame them? Anyone who isn't a rabid Trumper is now referred to as a rhino. Republican in name only, within their own party. And that's because in that party, it has become a race to the bottom, where the personality who can garner the most outrage and attention is the candidate that goes the farthest. It's not about experience, it's about attention on social media. It's not about addressing real issues facing our school district and our children. It's about galvanizing your base so you can get one over on everyone else. The question is, will the rest of us sit by and let that happen? Call me old school, but I don't think that political parties and church leaders have any business telling citizens how to cast their votes in local elections like school board and city council races. I don't think that partisans trying to advance national political agendas fed to them by media personalities who have no reason to give a rat's behind about what goes on here in North Central Washington have any business running for local office. But I, unlike my friends in the Chelan County GOP, don't possess the hubris to tell you who you should vote for. But I do urge you to vote, because I do think that if turnout is high and the people in all the neighborhoods of Wenatchee, not just the richest, vote, everything will work out just fine. So get those primary ballots in by August 3rd, and we'll see you next time for more common sense.
Introducing Alpine Airman. Because every home needs a superhero to eliminate poor indoor air quality, send inefficient operating equipment packing, and cut high energy bills down to size. For heating or cooling and equipment replacement, turn to the experts and the superheroes at Carrier and Alpine Air. We offer the best deals on high-efficiency Carrier products, along with friendly, knowledgeable service and incredible savings to fit your budget.
In a world afraid of technology, one man, one show. will bring you the newest innovations that may just change your life. This summer, Ray McNeil, and your Weekly Tech Update is your Weekly Tech Update with Ray McNeil.